The Intrigue of Nature. I have always been fascinated by nature, its beauty, and its brutality. Growing up, my weekends were spent exploring the nearby forest, observing the myriad of life forms that called it home. The more I learned about the natural world, the more questions I had. But one question in particular haunted me: why do some animals eat their own babies? As a biologist, I had the opportunity to delve deeper into this morbid curiosity. I remember the day I decided to dedicate my research to this perplexing phenomenon. It was a sunny afternoon, and I was in the university library, surrounded by stacks of books on animal behavior. The more I read, the more I realized that this was not just a simple question of survival, but a complex interplay of factors that varied across species and environments. With a notebook full of scribbles and a head buzzing with ideas, I set out to observe this behavior firsthand. My first stop was the local zoo, where I hoped to gain insights from the experts and perhaps witness the behavior in a controlled environment. As I walked through the gates, the cacophony of animal sounds filled the air, and the scent of hay and earth was almost overwhelming. I headed straight to the primate section, where I knew instances of infanticide had been observed. I spent hours watching the chimpanzees, noting their interactions, their social hierarchies, and their parenting behaviors. It was here that I met Dr. Susan Clarke, a renowned primatologist who had spent decades studying these fascinating creatures. Dr. Clarke was more than willing to share her knowledge and experiences. She explained that in some cases, infanticide among primates could be attributed to factors like resource scarcity, social stress, or even the elimination of rival offspring. But what intrigued me the most was her mention of maternal infanticide, where mothers themselves would kill and sometimes eat their young. With Dr. Clarke's guidance, I began to understand that this behavior was not as rare as I had initially thought. It was a survival strategy, a way for the mother to conserve resources in times of scarcity or stress. It was harsh, brutal even, but it was nature's way of ensuring the survival of the fittest. Into the wild. Armed with newfound knowledge, I decided to take my research into the wild. My destination was the Serengeti, a place teeming with life and death in equal measure. The vast savanna, with its golden grasses swaying in the breeze, seemed an unlikely place for such a grim study, but I knew that here, I would find answers. I joined a team of wildlife researchers who had been studying the predator-prey dynamics of the region for years. We set up camp near a watering hole, a hub of activity where animals of all kinds came to drink and where life and death dramas unfolded daily. For weeks, I observed the behavior of various animals, from lions and hyenas to zebras and wildebeests. I learned that infanticide was not confined to one species or one type of environment. Lions, for example, would kill the cubs of rival males to bring the females back into estrus. Hyenas, on the other hand, would sometimes eat their own young to ensure the survival of the dominant cubs. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an orange glow over the landscape, I witnessed a harrowing scene. A female lion, her ribs showing through her tawny fur, was pacing nervously. Nearby, her cubs were playing, oblivious to the danger. In a sudden, brutal act, she pounced on one of the cubs, killing it instantly. The other cubs scattered, and the mother began to eat the lifeless body. I was horrified, yet I couldn't look away. This was nature in its rawest form. The mother's actions were driven by a need to survive, to conserve her strength for the cubs that had a better chance of making it through the harsh dry season. It was a stark reminder that nature's rules were unforgiving. The psychological puzzle. Back at the research base, I pored over my notes, trying to piece together the psychological aspects of this behavior. It was clear that infanticide was not just a physical act but also a psychological strategy. To understand it better, I turned to the work of ethologists and psychologists who had studied animal behavior in detail. I reached out to Dr. Linda Thompson, a psychologist specializing in animal behavior. She invited me to her lab, where she conducted experiments to understand the mental processes behind infanticide. Her work focused on rodents, particularly hamsters and rats, which often exhibited maternal infanticide under certain conditions. Dr. Thompson explained that stress was a significant factor. When a mother rodent was subjected to extreme stress, such as overcrowding or lack of food, she was more likely to kill and eat her young. This behavior was a way to reduce the number of mouths to feed and increase the chances of survival for the remaining offspring. In her lab, I observed an experiment where a mother rat was placed in a crowded enclosure with limited food. Over time, as the stress levels increased, the mother began to show signs of aggression towards her pups. It was a heartbreaking sight, but it provided valuable insights into the psychological triggers of this behavior. Dr. Thompson's research also revealed another layer to the puzzle: hormonal changes. When a mother rodent was stressed, her body produced higher levels of cortisol, a stress hormone that could influence her behavior. This hormonal imbalance could override the natural maternal instincts, leading to infanticide. I realized that understanding infanticide required a holistic approach, combining field observations with laboratory experiments. The psychological aspect was just as crucial as the environmental and social factors. It was a complex web of interactions, each thread influencing the others in ways that were not always immediately apparent. The human connection. My research took an unexpected turn when I began to explore the parallels between animal and human behavior. Infanticide, though rare, has been documented in humans throughout history. The reasons were varied and often tragic, but there were striking similarities to what I had observed in the animal kingdom. I delved into historical records, case studies, and psychological research to understand the human connection. In many cases, human infanticide was driven by similar factors: stress, resource scarcity, and social pressures. But there were also cultural and psychological dimensions that added layers of complexity. I interviewed Dr. Emily Harris, a forensic psychologist who had studied cases of maternal infanticide in humans. She explained that while the act was often seen as a result of mental illness, it could also be a desperate response to insurmountable stressor. In some cultures, infanticide was even practiced as a form of population control or to preserve family honor. Dr. Harris shared a case study of a woman who had killed her newborn in a moment of extreme despair. The woman had been living in poverty, with no support system and overwhelming stress. Her actions were not premeditated but rather a tragic response to her circumstances. It was a sobering reminder of the fragility of the human mind under duress. Through these interviews and case studies, I began to see the broader implications of my research. Understanding the root causes of infanticide in animals could provide insights into preventing similar tragedies in humans. It was a daunting task, but I felt a renewed sense of purpose. A new perspective. As my research drew to a close, I reflected on the journey I had undertaken. What had started as a morbid curiosity had transformed into a profound exploration of nature's complexities. I had witnessed the brutality of survival, the psychological toll of stress, and the fragile balance of life. But more importantly, I had gained a new perspective on the interconnectedness of all life forms. The behaviors I had studied were not isolated phenomena but part of a larger tapestry of survival strategies. Each species, each individual, was driven by the same fundamental need: to survive and reproduce. My findings were published in a comprehensive paper, shedding light on the multifaceted nature of infanticide. The response from the scientific community was overwhelming, with many researchers eager to build on my work. It was a testament to the importance of understanding even the darkest aspects of nature. As I stood on the edge of the forest that had sparked my curiosity all those years ago, I felt a sense of closure. The question that had haunted me had led to a deeper understanding of life itself. And while the answers were not always comforting, they were a reminder of the resilience and adaptability of all living beings. In the end, my journey was not just about uncovering the reasons behind infanticide but about embracing the complexities of life. It was a journey that had taken me from the library to the wild, from the lab to the depths of the human psyche. And it was a journey that had changed me forever.